and welcome back to the Black Ordinary podcast, a monthly conversation about Black art, Black archives, and Black autonomy. My name is Caitlin B. Jones, and I'm your host and the proud founder of the Black Ordinary Project. The Black Ordinary is a multimedia platform, resource hub, and national database of community-based archives and community-based archival projects dedicated to preserving Black American history and culture. The Black Ordinary podcast is one of the many ways that the Black Ordinary Project platforms Black artists, Black archivists, Black community members, Black historians, anybody Black working to preserve the collective memories of Black America. For this episode, I'm so excited to be in conversation with my beautiful soror, my incredible line sister, Hypatia Sorunke. Hypatia Sorunke is a multimedia artist based in New York, New York. They combine their passions of storytelling and visual art through writing, photography, and filmmaking in order to rediscover and reconstruct radical other worlds in this lifetime. Their work has been exhibited at the Museum of Human Achievement, the George Washington Carver Museum and Cultural Center, Reeling the Chicago LGBTQ+ International Film Festival, Real Affirmations, Washington, D.C.'s International Film Festival, the Women's Film Festival, and Newark LGBTQ Film Festival. They were the recipient of Bernard College's Independent Research Grant, where they researched 1960s to 1980s media to help understand the construction of the Black action heroine. All of their work focuses on ideas of collective memory, relational aesthetics, and preserving Black radical tradition. Hypatia's most recent photographic project, Fitted WNBA, captures the vibrant, diverse attendees of the WNBA for the 2024 season. The series highlights the intersection of personal expression and collective solidarity, reflecting the power of sports as a platform for social change and identity building. In centering New York City as a place that helped birth the queer liberation movement and the New York Liberty, they hope to document the historical resistance of NYC street style, the creativity in self-fashioning, and the generational shift in the WNBA community. With that in mind, and a desire to bridge their interests in mapping LGBTQIA+ migration patterns, Hypatia set out to attend every New York Liberty game for the 2024 season to build an archive of photos that preserved a part of a national culture that has been existing in the shadows. I'm so excited for you to hear from Hypatia and learn more about their project, Fitted WNBA. Enjoy. Hype!
Hey, what's up, Kate? How you doing?
Better now that I see you.
Of course. It's always nice to see a fellow sister.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So, super excited to have you. Super excited to get into what you're doing. I have been following your project. Well, obviously, like following you forever. But like your
Of
project,
course.
when you first announced it, it was so exciting, and so I'm really happy to be able to feature you and the work that you're doing, not just in New York, but like all over the country.
Yeah.
So before we get into that, I always kick off the episodes with a segment called Extraordinarily Ordinary. And this segment is about highlighting Black American people who, even if their name didn't make it into the history books, regardless of their accomplishments, like their existence itself is extraordinarily ordinary. So, Hype, feel free to speak a name and tell a story of somebody that's special to you or somebody that you admire.
Okay, so this person probably will make it into the history books, unfortunately.
Not
For me, unfortunately for me, because I'm not prepared. But yeah, Mickalene Thomas. I want to speak that name into the
I'm
room.
sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm glad that was your reaction because I recently met Mickalene Thomas, and when I told
No
you, I
way.
was trying not to like stutter and like I was trying to compose myself. I was like, oh, that's crazy. And then I said my name. She repeated it back to me. I was like, oh my God, Mickalene Thomas said my name. So I was like trying so hard not to fangirl, but I want to speak their name into the space because I actually didn't know that they had been a sports fan. And last season, whenever I was going to the games, I did see them at a couple of the New York Liberty games versus Connecticut because they're up in at Yale doing stuff in Connecticut. But yeah, and so what I met them because they unveiled this banner that they had done. I don't know if it was commissioned or if it was just kind of like something that they wanted to do. But anyways, it was like a banner, championship banner for the New York Liberty. That is like really pretty. And maybe I can send you like a video of it because I was geeked out. And that's actually why I went to go up to her because I was like, hey, where's the banner? I'm not trying to bother you. And she was like, oh, hey, come here. And then we started talking. She had her little dog. I was like, yo, this is crazy.
Oh my
So yeah, I
God.
just want to wanted to do a little humble brag because when I was telling people about it, I was like, oh, I met Mickalene Thomas. They're like, who? I was like, who?
Please.
Anyways,
Ah,
exactly. So, very niche queer arts, queer black artists that I guess is niche. I wouldn't have said
yeah,
that. I do think she will make it into that little bit. I think she's in history books
absolutely.
as we speak.
Absolutely.
Um, so yeah, very fortunately.
Do you happen to have a bio that you can read really quick for those of you who don't understand why we're
And
fangirling
why we're
right now?
geeking. Yeah. So Mickalene Thomas is this kind of collage artist. I will say they do more multimedia. I think they started out as a painter, do sculpture. So kind of this person who deals with a lot of different like black memory in different ways. Whether that's through visual arts or whether that's through like actual 3D things. So I was geeked because I remember not I think it was like 2020. I was looking for all these like vintage magazines, and so I actually have this stack of like Vanity Fair because that was the only ones that I could get for like free that someone was just giving to me. And I was like, cool, perfect. And then I was thinking about doing collages with it. And then I don't know if it was a couple of years later or whatever, but anyways, Mickalene Thomas dropped this like this crazy collage collection that they had done with like Ebony magazine. So kind of taking this Black history and being able to reshape it into more of a contemporary way, but then also being able to like put her own kind of spin of just her perspective on what it means to be in this kind of like Black womanhood. So just to say, if you don't know Mickalene Thomas, you should know her now.
Yes.
And she said my name.
Period.
So
Ah,
yeah.
I'm so happy for you. That is like that feels like a bucket list item, to be honest.
Right,
Um,
right.
thank you for sharing. Let's get into you. Tell the people, how did you get your start in film, photography, installation work, and then ultimately archiving?
Yeah, no, I feel like my start, and this is not me trying to be like, oh, I was some child prodigy of some sort, but when I was younger, like my mom would always give me and my siblings like just disposable cameras. And so then we would run around and just as we were living life or as we were doing things, just taking photos of either each other. They were not really good. And if I can remember some of them, they were really blurry. But to say that I was able to kind of document my childhood through my mom kind of trying to find different things for us to do. She was always really crafty and was always trying to get us to make things, whether it was like for the holidays for our teachers, because before she retired, she was a teacher. So she was very like much a community builder in that way. So I feel like that's kind of where my interest in photography kind of started. Eventually it evolved into when I got my first DSI. I was taking photos on the shitty DSI camera. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, but anyway.
Please do. Please do.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so yeah, so I was taking photos on my city DSI camera and just kind of trying to document the world around me, in very low stakes ways. And then once I kind of got into college, I think that was where I started taking on more like historian roles for a lot of the organizations that I was a part of, or doing a lot more like social media. And so a big part of that is documenting, a big part of that is visual storytelling. And that's kind of how I started very early days trying to think about like what I needed to capture in a space. And then eventually, as I started experimenting more with film camera and specifically like making that transition from digital back to film, then I started trying to be a little bit more economical with my frame, but also just like with the process of film because it's a very expensive hobby. I think people like it for the aesthetic, but honestly, it is a very expensive hobby unless you're actually like really committed to wanting to learn more about film. Um, maybe save your coin. And that's no shade, but digital cameras exist. So I think that was kind of where I started getting into this practice of, because film is so archival, wanting to figure out how to first organize my own personal archive of things that I'm doing, but then also try to figure out how to think about images as like a part of history that you're capturing, rather than like, and that's maybe in contrast to some of the like more portrait or more kind of like the other kind of work that I was doing that is still in some ways like archival, but wasn't necessarily the purpose of me taking the photo wasn't archiving. It was more for like expression and more for just like capturing a moment. So that's kind of how I think my practice started and kind of or evolved and started and evolved and started. And yeah, and so then once I was in Austin, I want to say it was around 2020 when I got my first like artist exhibition, and like residency. It was a digital exhibition because it was COVID. But that was the first time someone had like paid me to go do a thing. And I was like, great, I like this. How do we do this more? And so, yeah, and that's kind of really how I started thinking about, like more photography, more like a fine art sense.
Mm, yeah. We'll be right back after a short break. And we're back. We are two Texans that have, dare I say, escaped from
Definitely found refuge.
What prompted your move from Texas to New York?
Oh, actually, so whenever my senior year, I was in this program, and I'm gonna say this maybe because some of your listeners are from UT might know, but to the rest of the world, this is made up, and I just want to say that. But one of my degree plans is called Plan 2 Honors, and so it's kind of this honors program where like you take all the courses that you take in high school, but like just at an honors level, and everyone in the class is studying so many different things. Like you could have someone who's an engineer next to someone who's studying like Asian American history, next to someone who's studying psychology, and we're all kind of trying to take whatever we're learning about in like math and come together to try to understand it from different perspectives. Anyways, all that to say, in order to graduate with that degree, you had to do a thesis. And both of my thesis supervisors, one of them is Jennifer Wilkes, who love her down. Shout out to her. And I met her originally because she was actually doing a Harlem Renaissance class. And so that was my introduction into maybe New York and this maybe like queered history. A lot of her research is more literary. And for a long time, I was like, I want to be a writer. But yes, a lot of her research is literary, and so that's kind of what drew me to her whenever I was doing a creative writing thesis. And then my other thesis advisor is Matt Valentine, or was Matt Valentine, and he also spent a lot of time, and he went to NYU for a while, doing creative writing, and then stayed in New York for just to be in the scene and just doing a lot more in publications and things like that for writing. And after I did my thesis, both of them were like, wow, it seems like you should go to New York. And for a while, I was very much like, I don't, no, let me chill. You know, I'm a Texan. I like driving. I like having
Yeah.
space.
Texans don't like to leave. We
And
don't.
it's because it's underrated, and I prefer it to continue to be underrated. Texas is terrible. It's a terrible place. Don't go to Texas,
God.
because the housing needs to stay where it is or go down. We do not need any more gentrifiers finding out how much space is in Texas. And I say that saying being in Manhattan and like understanding that Manhattan is maybe like I think it's like either 13 or 17 miles. Like that's an insane amount of miles because I have driven that to school. Like
Yeah.
like I've driven beyond that just to go to high school. Like you know what I'm saying? And it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So anyways, yeah. So that's what prompted my move here. And I specifically didn't want to live in Brooklyn. I only wanted to live in Harlem because I wanted to do more research. Um, and so I was able to get some like support from like Barnard College and things like that. But yeah, that was really what prompted my move, was wanting to deal or better understand like Black queer archives, and specifically like migration in Black queer archives. So when I first came here, I was really interested in looking at like 1960s to 1980s Harlem. And so that's kind of where I was like, because it was such like a hotbed for just so many things that we have today, whether that's like rights or whether that's like artistic expression or even like the Black arts movement, things like that. And so that's really what I was like. I want to go to what I'm seeing as my Mecca. And of course, Jennifer Wilkes was so happy to tell me, so happy to hear that, and to be like, you need to experience Harlem before it gets too gentrified. So
Yeah.
that's how I kind of migrated up here.
What because I think when people think about Harlem, they often go straight to the Harlem Renaissance, so like this like
Yeah,
2030s era. But 60s to 80s, that's a time frame I don't think people think about. I mean, obviously history is happening at
mhm,
all times, you know? So what is it about
yeah.
that time period that really interested you?
Oh yeah, like because okay, I really like film. I think this is like I don't know how much I should divulge of my childhood. Uh no, it's like I just
As long
don't want
as
I
you're
don't
comfortable.
I don't okay. You know what? It's time for me to be honest, live in my truth. I grew up kind of a Disney kid, kind of. Just like kind of. And when I say kind of,
I
I am
already loved
lowballing it.
you.
I
I
am
already loved
lowballing it.
you, but but I love you more now.
Thank you. Like, and I'm saying this to say, like, if me and you, like, let's say me and you went to a trip to Disney World,
Hmm.
I don't need a map. It's that, like, I don't actually need a map. I can tell you exactly where to go, like, and it's like, oh, we're tired, we should go see this show. Oh, we're like,
How did
you
I not
want,
know
like,
this
you want
about
some thrill.
you?
I keep it real low key. I keep it real low key because I think sometimes Disney adults are weird. I'm not a Disney adult. I will say I grew up. I grew up and was like, look, relax.
We gotta
But,
have a conversation after this.
but I will say most of my childhood was spent in, like, one of my favorite parks in Disney World is like at the time it was called MGM Studios. I don't remember what it's called now, but anyways, I think it's
Hollywood
called like
Studios.
Hollywood Studios.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Guys, what are we gonna do with this? Um, yeah, and so a lot of, like, when you go to that park, you're seeing a lot of the behind the scenes, and there's this one like exhibition where they kind of show you the behind the scenes of how, like, Walt Disney made a lot of the or like kind of how he made a lot of the original, like, animations, where it was kind of like, oh, here's like one slide where we're drawing the background, and then here's one slide where we're drawing the characters, and then so just like being able to visually build a story by looking at it from kind of front to back, if the best way to think about it, that was just always in my brain from the jump. And so, um, yeah, so because of my love for film and because of my love for, like, being able to construct these different worlds, kind of from like a fantasy lens, but also like from more of like a documentary or historical lens. When you look at the 60s to the 80s, like, that was actually one of the first times that, like, Black Americans were able to almost have some sort of control over what they were being perceived as and how they were being documented. And so that was something that was really interesting to me beyond the civil rights movement, because I think when I was really more interested in kind of looking at Black exploitation as, like, this kind of fantastical space where people were able to create this, like, empowered Black heroine, and, like, specifically I was looking at, like, Black women. That's really the archetype that I was looking at when I was looking into media. But I do think that in during that time period, what I was interested in was kind of this reclamation and also this almost like assertion of, like, Black power and Black empoweredness. And that's what kind of drew me to wanting to study or look deeper into that. And then, of course, Harlem being the mecca of that, I was like, yeah, I need to read about it and I need to go walk around and be like, cool, this used to be a really cool place and now it's a WeWork. So yeah,
Yikes.
exactly. But just to know that, like, these, even though like even though there is this gentrification, or there is this thing that where, like, preservation is being fought in some ways, like, it's still the place where it happened, and I think that's something to me that feels like I wanted to be a part of that. And when I first moved to Harlem, I actually lived like 2 or 3 blocks from the Schomburg, so, like, they were tired of me to say the
I'm
least.
jealous, actually.
Yeah.
They're celebrating 100 this year, aren't they? Is that?
Yeah, yeah. I think they're celebrating a lot of years. I don't know if it's 100, but they're always, yeah. It's
Yeah.
always really great over there, and yeah, like, they have jazz festivals. They, like, one of my favorites, like the Black Comic Book festival that they do. So yeah, like,
What?
yeah, exactly,
So what you're
exactly.
saying is I need to make a trip to come
Look,
see you.
look, I'm here. I'm posted. I've been here for a couple years now, so
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm late. I'm late.
I
From
It's
Disney
okay. You're
kid
right on
to
time.
filmmaker. This is
No.
no,
That's
no,
not my
no shame.
lore.
We
It is
listen
my
and we
lore.
don't judge because I too was a Disney kid
I
and
hear you.
may or may not be a Disney adult, but a cool one.
Okay.
A cool
Okay.
one.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about
We will. We will.
it.
We'll be right back after a short break. And we're back. Let's circle back.
Hmm.
Let's go back to film
Hmm.
and archives, and talk about your current project, Fitted WNBA. What are the origins of
Yeah.
it, and how has it evolved since it was a concept?
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually glad that we got here the way that we did, because I was actually this project, it's really convoluted how it came to be. which is why I feel like I try to like just keep it like fashion WNBA. But really, like what I was looking at was like Black queer migration patterns. And so then whenever I was in Texas, I was working at Equality Texas. And so a lot of what we were doing at the time that I was working there, it was like before they were trying to ban trans youth from playing sports. So a lot of what I was doing was trying to like help with advocacy with that, but also behind the scenes, what they were doing was building this like timeline of kind of like anti-trans, anti-queer legislation. And so that has always kind of been in the back of my mind. And so then when I was thinking about migration patterns, I was like, okay, let me try to figure out, because a lot of the bigger names from like the civil rights movement or even like the Harlem Renaissance actually did not originate from Harlem. And so that was what was interesting to me. I was trying to figure out like where people were coming from to be able to come to a place that had a platform to be heard or
Mm,
spoken.
mm,
And so then as I was thinking about this, a lot of what for me personally, as like a researcher and as a queer person, I don't like speculation around people's queerness. Like that's the one thing that I'm kind of like, okay, unless they were like out and very open about it, like they are who they want to be known as. And that's kind of
mm,
like, that's where I draw the line. And so as I was doing a lot of research, it was a lot of like, maybe this one person or like rumored to. And so it was just kind of like making me feel like I didn't want to project some sort of reality onto somebody that didn't feel comfortable being that. And so that's where I was kind of like, okay, let me try to figure out. I'm from San Antonio, Texas originally, which like, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a big sports town, but the San Antonio Spurs definitely for a very long time of my upbringing, it was like either the Spurs versus Kobe or the Spurs versus LeBron. And then the big three retired and they were like, cool, we're rebuilding. And so then I was thinking, I was like, okay, what do I know a lot about? What's a contemporary enough industry and what like has Black and queer people in it that are like open about it? And I was like, oh, the WNBA. And so then I was like, wait, let me see if maybe if I'm thinking about this right, let me try to think about the timeline of the teams that they've had because there's been teams that have folded, teams that like move, things like that. And so I was trying to think about these teams as like almost like these like Black queer hubs and trying to map their migration and seeing if it kind of aligned with some of the like anti-trans, anti-queer, or just like I hate women campaign that is kind of underlying in America. And when I kind of put those timelines together, I noticed there was a huge migration of teams out of the South into either the North or the West around different like peaks and times where there was kind of an attack on queer and trans people and just like bodily autonomy, just like women in general in the South. And so that's what was interesting to me because being from San Antonio, we did have the Spurs, but at some point we actually did have a WNBA team. They were called the San Antonio Stars. They had moved from Utah to San Antonio, and then now they actually are the Las Vegas Aces. And so that's what was interesting to me because before the Liberty won this year, the two previous years the Las Vegas Aces had won, and so I was interested to see what kind of needs to go into building or almost like repurposing some sort of like team or to be able to build this like almost safe haven for Black people or Black women or specifically Black queer women. And so that's really how my convoluted brain was thinking, or where my interests were leading me. And then I actually was trying to think about, I was looking at like immediately the first thing I do when I'm interested in something, I look for books. Like I start Googling, like, okay, where can I find more information on this? And so then I found this one book that was called Fly, the Big Book of Basketball Fashion. Actually, let me back up. I actually went to this talk and it was at Poster House, which is like a big, like kind of graphic honestly like graphic archive is the best way I can like describe it in New York. It was like different posters, different like types of visual aids that people have used. And they had this exhibition that was that was about they had a talk that was called The Aesthetics of Black Power. I I can't I think the exhibition was called Black Power to Black People. But basically what it was a whole bunch of like posters and like old newspapers from like the civil rights movement or when the Black Panther Party was around, alive, and thriving, right? And during this talk, they were talking a lot about kind of how the aesthetics of Black Power were able to be established kind of without like on accident in some ways, right? Like it just so happened that Angela Davis, had her hair or like was wearing a fro when she got arrested, and that was just what she was wearing. And then like thinking about the accessibility of a movement. Like when you walk around New York, everyone talks about like the New York blacks, right? So it's like your like what you're wearing. In terms of just like black, like once you kind of like perfect an all black outfit, that's when you're really a New Yorker. And so then thinking about, I'm being for real. And then so then thinking about the like Black Power movement and how like accessible black clothing was, and to the point where they were talking about how there was kind of this undercover or like underground economy of people just being like, oh, I'm gonna go to this thing, let me grab this, let me borrow this, let me borrow your leather jacket. Because at the end of the day, everyone had a leather jacket. Like it wasn't something that you had to go get. It wasn't something that was like you had to outsource. It wasn't like this exclusive item that like you had to obtain. It was just around. And so then that's what made the movement so accessible to people to be able to like identify without having to speak, or identify in a community without having to like do a lot of the hurdles of just like, yeah, going through a lot of hurdles. So with all that in mind, I was trying to figure out, okay, even though I'm, I don't necessarily want to look at the players because I think I could do that sitting at home because it's like they're so highly surveilled in that way. I was like, what is kind of this undercurrent that is being spoken about in the book, the Fly, the Big Book of Basketball Fashion. So whenever I got that book, I was interested in it because I was like, okay, here's maybe a little glimpse into how fashioning yourself in this space can lead to either progressive movements or just like an evolution of the way that people are able to express themselves. But then when I got it, it was all about the NBA. And so I was excited, I was excited to like learn about, oh, like
Mm,
Cheryl Swoop's shoes or like, Candace Parker, I was interested in that.
yeah.
But then, and the fact that it was called Fly, the Big Book of Basketball Fashion, I was like, is that not bad? Are we not playing the same sport
Right.
here?
Right.
Like, is this not the same sport? And so yeah, so that's why I was kind of like, okay, interesting. Now I need to find something that has women's sports in it. But what was actually really refreshing to me is that the author, whenever he was doing like book tours and things like that and talking about it, he was crediting the book as like a documentation or like kind of this documentation of the evolution of like men's fashion. And all the way from like when they had to wear suits to like now where you have like really key players like Russell Westbrook experimenting in different ways, or like even people painting their nails, like Jared McCain, like things like that. And he credited the LGBTQIA plus, yes, he said all the acronyms, movement for this evolution being able to take space or take place. And so then that's when I was like, okay, so there's obviously some sort of like underlying thing with this that like is being spoken about, don't really have a visual aid, don't really have an opportunity to like really understand what he's talking about. Um, just from like, and just from like an outside perspective, like obviously I feel like I'm ingrained enough in like queer spaces to know, but to like talk about it in the specifically basketball space and specifically like maybe the WNBA space, just because I don't know how friendly or how much of a concerted effort the NBA has done to try to like preserve some sort of like queerness in their body of like fans, whereas like the WNBA has like mandated pride games and was the first like league to do that, right? So like they're safeguarding this space that kind of helped them grow, but also is really a part of their like them, like the people that are on the court are also in community with the people that they want to show up. So that's what was kind of the aha moment where I was like, okay, maybe if I just attend enough games, I'm sure I'll be able to see this kind of like queer undercurrent of fashion that can help kind of not necessarily illuminate why the men's fashion was able to evolve so much, but really more so highlight the kind of backbone of this space being rooted in like queerness, and specifically I was looking at like black queerness, even though like I took pictures of anyone who was like really wearing it. But yeah, that was kind of like my one bias as I was kind of building this archive, was that I wanted to look more black queer leaning. And so that's kind of the long convoluted origin story of fitted WNBA.
We'll be right back after a short break. And we're back. Why do you think that fashion is such an important component to archiving Black queer history and collective memory?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to queerness, a lot of it is like signaling, right? And that's like one thing that I feel weird about sometimes because I don't think you have to like signal that you're queer to be queer, but a lot of the origins of like queerness is rooted in some sort of thing that you do to yourself, whether that is like, the dandyism where like you're dressing up as what is seen more typically in masculine attire, or something that's like, I feel like some people get like there's like lore about like a nautical tattoo that was like on women's wrists that like once they saw it, they're like, oh, you like fishing. Interesting. you know so
The
like things like
carabiner
that.
clip on the
Exactly, like modern day carabiner clip, and this is where we're at. But yeah, but to say that like the fashion is so much of a expression of yourself, and almost like it helps. It's the way that I think people need to start looking at it, besides like an aesthetic. It's like, how can you prepare yourself to, or at least maybe this is how I look at it, but it's like, how can I prepare myself to be able to go through the day as comfortably as I can and as prepared as I can. Right. And so then when you think back to before the TikTokification of fashion, it's like people were dressing in what they were going to wear to work. Like that's what you were wearing. And then once you were out of work, maybe you took off your, overalls, and like maybe you got a little bit more relaxed, but at the same time, what you're dressing for is what you're going to be in the world for that day. And so that's really what kind of sparked my interest. And then also this like collective memory, right? Like even as you look at like movements like the Black Power movement, it's like some of these things that weren't necessarily key choices for the person. Like thinking about Angela Davis, like she wasn't necessarily like, oh, I'm gonna wear a fro and get arrested. It's just like this is how she showed up, and this is what happened, and now it's like an iconic photo of her in that blue room. And so it's like things like that where it's like, how is showing up as yourself every day, kind of helping not only preserve the collective memory of this like queerness in the WNBA space, but like your own self. And because I didn't necessarily see a lot of kind of eyes turned towards trying to uncover this like underground, or not necessarily underground, because it's like anybody could have done this, and I say that to everyone. I'm like, anybody could have done this, anybody could have done this in a concerted way. It's just I just so happened that I did it first, and that's just it.
Yeah.
And I'm not even trying to be like a like really. I'm off my high horse. Like this was actually like I'm not
Okay.
even. No, I'm serious though. Like I'm really serious. Like, and I mean this in with like the most love. I just wish, like sometimes I genuinely wish someone else had done it. So that way I could have just bought
Mhm.
the book and then went along with my life, and not had to like not felt the need to like uncover something.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, but I do think that it feels like something that, especially when I was looking into trying to, um like when I was looking into 1960s, 1980s Harlem, because Harlem is such like a key point of like basketball. I was really hoping to find these like archival images of like either women's basketball players or just like crowd shots of people playing basketball, and I just couldn't find it. And so then that's kind of where I was like, okay, I want to be able to learn more about not only the people that are on the court, but also like the people that were attending the games, because that also helps me better understand, especially as someone who like was trying to do some sort of like black exploitation like screenplay. I was like, I can't really character build because I don't have anything to go off of. Like I don't really have. I could maybe try to speculate things like that, but I hate speculation, and it's just like I want concrete things. And so because of that, I wanted to try to figure out a space that I could kind of throw my hat in the ring, but then also like eventually I do want to build some sort of digital archive where people are able to upload their own photos, and I'm not the like sole person taking the photo, because that was never like my goal in life. And that's kind of where I'm just like, I want to be able to kind of democratize the archive in a way where like self-preservation is also like at the center of this. Like I'm not the one like holder or spotlight to what's important or what's fashion or what's in the space. It's just this was my experience and this is who I ran into. And that's kind of like is what is the kind of pros and cons of an archive, right? And so even thinking about collective memory, it's like I wanted it to feel like something that was a collection of something, but it wasn't exclusively the only way that people could show up in the space. And so that's the part that I'm now trying to expand on. But at least for this, this is just a collection of a lot of people who just showed up to games and saw some kid who was like, hey, can I take a photo of you? I like what you're wearing. This is gonna be in a photo book. They're like, yeah, awesome, cool. And then being like, cool, what's your Instagram? So
Dope.
anyways, that's that. I think it's important all around.
Absolutely. So you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. So in 2024, you wrote an article for Vogue after you attended your first New York Liberty game.
Mm,
And you wrote that seeing so many queer basketball fans was like witnessing hope become a renewable resource for our community. Can you expand on that and talk about what characteristics a WNBA game versus an MNBA game
mm.
has that make that renewable resource possible?
You know, I think one thing about like the basketball space, or at least the sports space, is like there's so much like hope in it. And really honestly, like if we can just like for a moment get a little crazy, it's such like a speculative fantasy space where like there's so many people who get together and just talk about the possibilities of things that have not happened, but that whenever they watch, they're hoping for it to happen. And so I think whenever it comes to like being in America at this time, I do like before this, I was working I was gonna say 9 to 5, but honestly, a 9 to 9 nonprofit job that was just a lot of like I was working in the environmental space. And so like when you're confronted every day with like the ramifications of climate change and kind of all of the things that are almost like not I don't want to say like preventable disasters, but it's like things that are like actual like heavy disasters. It was really hard to come from a place of hope because honestly, even some of the people that were working in the space, it's really hard for them to have hope every day, which is like, it's real. That's real. Like, it's really hard right now to feel like you can access some sort of hope very easily. And so I think there's a lot of like initiatives of people trying to like capture joy or capture like other things that are around this kind of happiness. But really being in that space, it really like you can see the hope in people's eyes and you can feel kind of the momentum, and for it to be such a space that's rooted in self-expression, like they want you to scream for your favorite fan or like for your favorite player. They want you to go all out and dress as crazy as you want. Like they want you to just be who you are in this space. I think that's one thing that like I can't really speak for MNBA games because I really don't attend most of them. And if I'm being honest, the last one that I went to, I wasn't really looking too hard in the same way that I wasn't really, how do I say this? There was a lot of men, and I feel like usually whenever I'm around men, I just kind of like blinders on, where the girls at. I'm a girl's girl. I'm a girl's poppy. Like I'm like, where are we at? Where are we at for real? You know? And so I think that I can't really speak to that space, and I would actually like someone who is usually in that space who has like experienced that space as much as I've experienced this space to really speak on it.
Mhm.
Um, but to say at least for like a WNBA game. Like usually if someone's like booing loudly or like harassing a player, the people around them are like, stop, which is hilarious because it's like when you think about sports, it's like you're supposed to heckle, you're supposed to get in their head. But honestly, there's so many people that even when I was interviewing them, I was like, oh, like who are you rooting for? They're like, honestly, everybody. I just want to watch a good game. And there's like some pureness in that that like allows for this hope of just like women doing the best that they can for the day. And that's just like it. That's like all the only expectation that you want. And like when I think about my life, I'm like, that's actually all I want every day.
Yeah.
So then being able to go into a space where like that's actually at the center of what they're trying to create and all the things they're trying to resource. And then being able to see people who have like witnessed this person, struggle through either, because like another thing about like the NBA versus the WNBA, like the NBA, you can do 1 year in college and be done. But like in the WNBA, you actually have to do all 4 years before you actually are thinking about a professional career. There's not a lot of people that do like quit or like leave college early. And when they do, there are a few, I will say that, but most of the time it is people who are going all 4 years, sometimes even a fifth year and like graduating with masters. Like these are women with professional degrees who are actively choosing to ball out on your favorite player every day. Like they're actively choosing to hit that three in their face. And I think there's something like really like empowering about that, right? Like being able to not only have that choice to be able to play, but also like knowing that you know that you have something to fall back on because you're not making millions of dollars off your rookie contract. You're not like in a place where you're financially secure enough. It's like you're actually having to make the choice to almost like do this thing that you love. And then that's like at the crux of then people are showing up and hoping for you to also do your best. And so that's what I mean. Like when it's such a different environment versus like what I would see as like more traditionally like male centered space, like sports spaces,
Mhm.
that whenever I was there, I was like, wow, everyone's gay. Like, like everyone's jumping up and down, and you just hear the chorus of like the carabiners and the keys. I'm just kidding, but but you know, that's my queer fantasy in the sports space. But yeah, and just to say that it is really like a community of people, like yeah, even like yeah, there yeah, that's all I have to say. And just to say like it's really queer and really woman forward, and I think that's what kind of drew me to the space originally. um and then what also made me realize that this project was actually really feasible, because whenever I was doing it, honestly, maybe only like 7 people told me no, like that I couldn't take the photo, or that they were just like were busy or they had to do something, which
Mhm.
is insane because I talked to so many people that it
Yeah.
was like, oh, like you're gonna make time for this thing just because we're here, cool. And that's what I mean. Whereas like I don't know what the MMBA space is looking like, but there's definitely that kind of openness that also allows for this hope and for like all of the positive things to be able to be generated so freely and so like regularly throughout the time of the game.
We'll be right back after a short break. And we're back. After over 50 New York Liberty games, 12 WNBA stadiums, and one national championship, is there anything that you've learned about yourself and or the expansiveness of queerness during the making of this project?
I I think what I learned the most, and even whenever I was going into it, I was really kind of hesitant at first to start posting a lot of the get ready with me's, because I felt like I was still trying to like understand my own style, and I didn't want to fall into this like TikTokification or this like fast fashion, because that's not who I am and that's not what I wanted to do. And I feel like sometimes there is this like performative aspect when it comes to fashion online that I didn't want to subscribe to. So I feel like when it was over, I feel like what I learned really was just like what I felt most comfortable in. And like that to me, like building like that paired with like my own personal queer expression, I think was a revelation. Like I don't think I really had it finely tuned until honestly this point. Which is fine. Like I'm still, I'm 20, 27 years young. And I say that as if I'm like really old, but but yeah, it feels like a long time, yo. I don't know. I don't know. Time moving slow and fast. But yeah, so I really feel like that's one thing that I learned. And then also just like that, like each place has its own kind of different expressions of queerness. That is interesting. But then also each stadium has its own kind of like, the best way I can describe it is kind of like when I was talking about fashion earlier, about like you're preparing yourself the best for to show up the best in that, like for the day. That's kind of what I think every stadium has, where it's like some of them are more fashion forward, some of them are more like fangirl forward. That's kind of like the range that I use, where it's like fangirl is like you're decked out in merch, you're dressed as the mascot, like you're raw for this team. And then fashion is just like, oh, like I really want to express myself right now and just so happen to be in this space. So there, I feel like that's kind of what I was from, just like a from an outsider looking in, trying to like gauge in some ways, but also just that like everyone every stadium kind of has their fans for a different reason. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like some stadiums are really basketball forward. Like some stadiums, like everybody is on the edge of their seat about everything that's happening on the court at every single moment. And then there's some where it's like laid back. Sometimes, like they're playing with the mascot, like, oh, here's a cool graphic on the jumbotron, like things like that, where it's like, oh, it's kind of more laid back environment. But really, I think what I just learned is that there's so many people who love women's sports, and there's so many people who love women. And I think that was not necessarily something that is always at the forefront of sports or even at the forefront of America, but to say like it was really nice to be in these spaces and to take a concerted time to be in spaces that were so women and queer forward. And that's really it. I learned that the Liberty won a lot of games and that it's a well-oiled machine, but at the same time that it took a long time to get there. And I think it's been interesting to see kind of how all the teams from last season to this season have kind of evolved. Um, and yeah, I just learned that I really actually do love basketball and that like really I hope that people will look more to sports as a way to really understand hyper local politics rather than to just be tuning in for like oh, that's a flashy fit or oh, such a crazy like 20-point game. Like, and not to say that those things are less than, but I think whenever I was looking at the space, I was really trying to see how hyper local politics were reflected in the communities that they were building. And so even if you don't like sports, even if you are like, I've never watched a WNBA game, I don't know what's happening. Is that a goal? What are we talking about? I just really hope that more people give sports an opportunity to actually be a part of history and a part of culture making or at least be the part of history and be the part of culture making that it actually is. And I think that's one thing where it's like a lot of sports is about longevity. Like I feel like that's what they reward, like longevity and accolades. But it's like sometimes that one rookie that just like had a 50-point game and then dropped off the face of the earth, like that was insane. And we should all be like, wow, that was insane. Um, but yeah, one of my favorite, and maybe this is a little footnote, one of my favorite things whenever like I was bringing somebody who didn't really like sports too much, um, to the games, I would always kind of try to give them an analogy where it was like, okay, the best way to think about this is kind of like a courtroom, right? If you like all the players are always on trial. They're always on trial. Everything that they're doing is always like up for scrutiny or up for replay or up for like some sort of thing to the jury, right? The people who are the judges the people who are the judges are the refs. Obviously, there is some sort of higher up system. I'm not going to get too convoluted into that, but it's like the rest of the judges and the people who have a say but don't really have a say and are the jury is really the crowd. So it's like if honestly, I'm gonna be real, this might be a little controversial, but like I was sitting and I'm saying this because this was like one of the controversial plays for the championship. Apparently like one of the really key players when you look back at the film traveled on a very key possession that ended up leading to them getting two free throws to be able to like get the lead to win this championship. When I was in the stadium, if you would have told me that she traveled, I would have no, yeah, I would have not believed you. I was gonna say something crazy, but like I would have not believed you. And I would have been like, bro, what are you even watching? Like, blah, blah, blah. And then when I watched the footage back, I was like, oh, that's insane. She actually took like 20 million steps and she's actually in China and she came back. Like, that's insane. And I'll admit that as someone who's not really tied to New York, as someone who's like, like as just an outside party, just like look, fairness and ethics and all the things, it was a travel. Now, being in Barclays with literally everyone stood up for probably the last 2 minutes of the game. Like nobody was sitting down. Um, it's hard. It's hard when everyone's screaming. It's hard when Ellie's twerking over there. It's hard, so it's like all these things, but it's like that's actually the power that you have in showing up in these moments because it's like being there and being able to kind of create an environment that is so high stakes or so high powered it actually does, like you're able to shift it just a little bit. And so whenever that's the analogy I give to people, maybe that's just like my wanting to be a sports entertainment lawyer brain going, but I'm also just like, look, if you just look at it like drama, it's like she hit her, ooh, like, yeah, it becomes a little bit more like interesting for someone who's maybe not like looking at like, oh, was that was that like yeah anyways I was gonna say something convoluted thing that yeah anyways it's like you're not like in it for the stats or you're not in it for if it was like a clear path foul or like it's like you're not in it for the details, you're in it for the experience. That's a really kind of I felt like it was a really easy way for people to get onboarded to what was happening without actually knowing what the rules were but yeah, so that's my footnote.
What are you looking forward to most for this upcoming season?
um Honestly, I don't even mean to shameless plug, but I'm just excited to like finally have a book that I can like
Plug
talk
it.
about. I think that's it. Because I think one thing about like, I don't know, I feel like I'm also this type of person, but it's like I want to see the end results. And I think now after I've done all the things and I've been in a position where like I can now share back to maybe some either newer fans or like really show older fans like something that they can appreciate. I think that's what I'm really excited for, is just to be able to talk more and like to see how people are reacting to the thing that I created. But other than that, like I really am excited just for the basketball of it all. Like I didn't realize how much like, how much of my childhood and like formative years was actually surrounding the game, and like how much knowledge I actually do know that is not regular knowledge to people. And so I think that's what I'm excited about, is just to like be in the spaces and be able to talk to people who also share that same kind of like passion, and maybe like haven't had access to either the games or the space, or just like the like kind of drive to want to be in this space. So I think that's really what I'm excited for, and I'm just excited to like, yeah, I'm excited to see what comes next, because I can only see this league going up, and I think everyone can only see that. So I'm excited for like expansion teams. I'm excited for like the next kind of chapter of looking really deeply into like migration patterns and like hyper local politics that are able to like provide a good platform for women to be able to play basketball. And just like, yeah, I'm like, I don't want to go on the list, but it's like NIL deals. I'm excited for like college basketball. I'm excited to
Yeah.
just see what in this space, like how this space actually allows for some sort of empowerment in women to be able to become a little bit more democratized across the US. So that's my really nerdy answer, but I'm just excited to see the fashion. That's what everyone wants to hear.
And you're gonna travel with the team again this year to all games.
No, I this year I'm staying in New York just because
Mm.
yeah, like I don't know how they do it. Like granted, I was not on the court, but I've never been that tired in my life. So I'm like,
Mhm.
I know some of y'all are in 10 seasons, I know some of y'all are in 20. I know some of y'all like been doing this since you were 18, and that's insane, And so it's just like, yeah. And even thinking about before that, like even just thinking about all the things you have to do in order to become a professional basketball player. It's like, oh, y'all travel regularly. Like these are migratory people.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, so I'm really happy to be in one place for a very long time, and really like take advantage of like understanding this kind of like the kind of one of these birthing grounds for basketball, um on a more intimate level, because I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to do another book. I'm going to do like a zine or like a magazine,
Mm.
talking to a lot of the people in New York who kind of make up this fandom, and make up the fashion and things like that, of like what you're seeing on the court, or just like I guess in the tunnel. And so that's what I'm more excited about, is like to dive deeper into, instead of getting this like very surface level like um kind of just like gauge. Because I think that was one thing that was kind of like hard for me, was that whenever I was going to these other places, I only went to them maybe like once or twice, and so then it's like I don't want to say that my images are like the fashion for the place, right?
Mm.
And so
Mhm.
that's where I was like, I really actually hope that this is able to continue in a more concerted way. And yeah, even though this is like a book of people across the WNBA, I do think there are like little nuances that, my archive is not perfect, and I know that. And I
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
actually hope for us to build a more perfect collective archive at some point in time. So
Yeah.
that's really what I'm excited about, and excited to just be in New York. There's so much good things happening here around women's sports. So
Mm. Nice.
We'll be right back after a short break. And we're back.
I'd like to transition to our rapid fire buzzword section.
no,
Um,
go for it.
I do not reveal the words
Ugh,
prior to.
okay.
I don't reveal the words to the podcast guest prior to recording, because I want it to be off the dome.
Yay.
But it's just a word association game. I'll say a
Okay. Okay.
word and or phrase. You'll respond with the first word or phrase that comes to your
Okay.
mind. That's it. Are you
Okay. I
ready?
like games. Yeah. Let's go.
Okay, here we go.
uh,
Fashion,
evolution.
archives.
Ugh. No, it's supposed to be the first word.
No right or wrong
Archive.
answer.
No, I know, but there is in my brain. Um, archive. History.
Autonomy,
Deserved.
Harlem.
I was gonna say Renaissance, but honestly, like, yeah, there's so many words for Harlem.
WNBA.
Is up.
History.
Her story. No, I'm just kidding.
Brooklyn.
Um, music,
Black women.
amazing.
Queer.
Renaissance,
Community.
necessary.
Hope.
Renewable.
Collective memory.
I don't want to say necessary. It's like it's adamant. It's adamant.
Last but not least, Ellie the elephant.
BBL. That's what I'm gonna say on that one.
Oh my God.
BBL.
Thank you for indulging me. I appreciate
Of
it.
course. No beef to Ellie. Ellie, don't beef with me. You're gonna win. You're from New York.
Such an icon.
Exactly.
So we're nearing the end, unfortunately.
Yes.
But to close us out, I always like to ask the podcast guests to provide 2 or 3 books to add to the Black Ordinary's digital bookshelf. Are there
Of
any
course.
titles that you recommend for our listeners and or viewers?
Yes. I'm gonna show you the proof of the book that I'm doing. It's called The Fitted
Yes.
W. So here's the proof. It's like shiny, it's cute. It's not the
Yes.
final, but yes, this is what it's gonna look like, to some extent. And then let's start with this one, Back in the Days.
Mhm.
And this is by Jamil Shabazz, who's an amazing photographer who is just like really spent a lot of time in New York and Harlem. I want to say native. I don't know to what borough, but yeah. So this was actually one of the books that was on the like pitch deck for my book because it really just it's not necessarily about fashion, but it really does capture the fashion, the aesthetic, the movement, that it takes to be able to be a part of community and like the fashioning of that back in the day, literally. So I think everyone should check this book out. And then this other one I pulled from the archive. Let me see if I can actually open this. But there's this really cool shop called Black Market Vintage. This is a shameless plug. They take all
Love
my money.
them.
Actually, yeah, and they're in Brooklyn. So
And they're
this
Black
is
queer owned.
Black queer owned. Yes, their wedding was in I think the New York Times. So literally gay as hell.
Yes.
So you should go here. But anyways, I got this book, the Black book. And this is one of my most prized possessions. And
Yeah.
if anyone has the opportunity to look at this book, this is amazing. It is like some sort of like archive slash it is an archive. It's an archive and it just basically shows you a good like conglomerated history of blackness from so many different ways. So I think this is one thing that like if you are interested in archive, if you're interested in Black history, this is really amazing. I was inspired to get this book because they did a exhibition around this book that I went to go see in New York. So this was one of my most. I was like, I need to grab that. I need to find that to show you guys. And then this last one is called A Loose Manual on Unlayering Stuff Making and Hypervisibility, called Surfacing. And this is by one of my friends, Zoe Pulley. Literally, it's amazing. I'm like, I don't know if this is the only one that I'm like, please, if you can find this, if you can get your hands on this, if you can bully Zoe to like put it online, so more people can have it. I definitely think this is one thing. This is actually a part of, I think this was their thesis actually from, I think they went to RISD, I don't know, like Rhode Island School of Design. I think that's where they went. But anyways, it's a really great like history of kind of like them. It's kind of like they kind of were looking at their own personal archive and trying to make it visible and like tell their own story of like how them and their families experience being a Black American in the US. I think it's mainly from like a East Coast perspective, but honestly like this is a really great designed book, but also just like the content of it. I think there's actually an online like there's QR codes throughout it, so like there's also an online part or like portion where you can like really dive deep into what they're trying to tell everyone about, which is like document your own things. You have meaning and you can make it. And it's actually really possible to be a part of an archive if you make one. So anyways, this is the only shameless plug besides my own that I will say. um, but yeah, those are the three books that I think that should be added to every bookshelf. If you're Black and queer, but the queerness is like but it's like if you're Black, or if you're of color and just wanting to learn more about ways that you can join in on the Black radical tradition. I think those are some of the books that you should add to the bookshelf.
Such great additions. Hype, where can we find you and or Fitted WNBA?
Yeah, I mean, just you could follow us on IG, on TikTok, see me be goofy on there. But yeah, the final book should be done in probably by the time this comes out. So yeah, if you go to fittedwnba.com, you'll be able to buy the book. It's called The Fitted W. And yeah, just look at the lookbook and show up to games and have fun and love yourself and your community. In a real way. Don't do it performatively. In a real way. Show up.
That part. That part. Thank you so much, Hype. I love you. I love the work that you're doing. I appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing your work.
No, yeah, thanks for having me. I feel like this is a really great project that you're doing, and I would love to support it in any way. I think everyone should listen to this because there's no one who works harder than a Virgo, and Kate has been working real hard. And look, and I will say to the rest, sometimes there is Virgo slander for me. I will say that, but at least right now, it's like, yeah, I really rock with you. And again, I think you're working really hard to do this, and it's just amazing what you're creating and what you're gonna be able to create when you look back after 50 games and and see kind of what your archive looks like. So I'm just excited to be a part of it, and I'm glad that I'm glad to be in this lifetime with you. So yeah,
Sis, ditto.
of course. Of course. All right. No more being nice to Virgos. I'm just kidding.
Wow. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Black Ordinary podcast. The Black Ordinary is a grassroots platform dedicated to uplifting the collective memories of Black America. Be sure to check out our collective memory database and more resources on our website, theblackordinary.com. For more Black art, Black archives, and Black autonomy, you can follow us on Instagram @The Black Ordinary and subscribe to our YouTube channel @The Black Ordinary. Stay Black and stay blessed. See you soon.